I can't say that everybody is 100% satisfied with me or with the economic policy what we are running here. But there are some results. Full employment. It's something which is really respected by the people, and probably the strongest family subsidizing system in the world.
Today we are going to talk about one of the most talked about figures in European politics and one of the biggest political tensions inside the European Union right now. I'm talking about Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and how his actions and conflicts with Brussels are shaping not just Hungary's future, but the future of the EU itself. Before we go further, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to EU Politics so you don't miss any important updates. We're going to break this down in a way that anyone who cares about European governance or world affairs can understand. Let's start with where we are right now. Across Europe, political leaders are preparing for a major EU summit in mid-December, where some of the biggest decisions in recent months will be made. One of the main issues on the agenda is the question of how the EU should handle frozen Russian assets worth about 210 billion euros, and whether those funds can be used to support Ukraine's defence and reconstruction. At the centre of this debate is the fact that not all EU member states agree on the path forward, and Viktor Orbán's Hungary is one of the most vocal opponents of further moves on this front. For months, Brussels officials have been working on a plan to indefinitely freeze those Russian central bank assets so that they can be used as the basis for a large loan to Ukraine. Traditionally, the freezing of assets tied to sanctions needed to be renewed every 6 months, and every member state had to agree. That gave countries like Hungary and Slovakia the power to veto renewals and block the use of those funds. The new approach would use emergency economic provisions to make the freeze permanent, with a qualified majority rather than unanimous consent. And that shift is significant because it effectively bypasses the power of a single veto to hold up EU foreign policy. Hungary's reaction has been fierce. Orbán's government says the EU Commission is acting unlawfully by seeking to lock up these frozen assets without unanimity. According to a report of his comments, Budapest claims this is an overreach that undermines the rule of law and arrogates power to European institutions at the expense of member states like Hungary. Brussels' move, Orbán argues, is an example of how EU leaders are willing to sidestep treaty norms when it suits their policy goals. That argument might sound technical, but under the surface it reflects something much deeper, a clash over how much sovereignty member states should retain versus how much power the EU should have to act collectively. Orbán insists that decisions affecting national security and economic policy should require full consensus. The Commission and other governments say that when the threat to Europe's interests is existential, unanimity is too slow and can be weaponised. That's the core of the current argument over frozen Russian assets. At the same time, the EU is trying to push forward with Ukraine's long-term outlook by advancing its membership process, despite Hungary's objections. In recent meetings with leaders in Lviv, EU officials outlined detailed benchmarks Ukraine must meet to move toward accession to the Union. This covers reforms on the rule of law, democratic institutions, the internal market, and foreign policy alignment. However, progress toward full membership is complicated because Hungary continues to veto certain accession steps on the basis of concerns about Ukraine's treatment of its Hungarian minority and economic risks. Orbán's stance on Ukraine is not just procedural. He has, in multiple interviews and statements, warned that Europe is on the brink of a dangerous moment, and criticised the EU's limited role in peace negotiations between Russia and the United States. From his perspective, the priority should be peace negotiations rather than punitive sanctions that drag Europe deeper into conflict. His commentary reflects a broader pushback against what he calls Brussels' overextension of power. Orbán's approach to foreign policy is consistent with his broader political project. He is sceptical of policies that he believes could destabilise Hungary or draw it further into geopolitical conflict. He also insists that Hungary should have the freedom to pursue what it believes is its best interest, even if that means diverging from EU consensus. This stance has won him some sympathy among political leaders in other countries who are wary of centralised decision-making, but it has also drawn sharp criticism from leaders who say this undermines collective European security. You may be wondering why this debate matters so much. Part of the answer is that the EU is trying to navigate multiple crises at once. The ongoing war in Ukraine, energy security after years of over-dependency on Russian gas, and internal disagreements on values like press freedom and democratic governance. These challenges are testing both the EU's unity and its ability to act decisively. On the media freedom and rule of law front, the European Commission has formally launched an infringement procedure against Hungary under the EU's Media Freedom Act. This step, taken just months before Hungary's 2026 parliamentary election, accuses Budapest of failing to comply with multiple provisions designed to protect independent journalism and media pluralism. The Commission says Hungary's laws interfere with editorial freedom, restrict transparency in media ownership, and fail to protect journalistic sources and communications. Although Orbán's government has dismissed these claims, this move signals a willingness by Brussels to hold member states accountable for what it sees as fundamental European values. That isn't all. Across Hungary, tensions over civil liberties and minority rights are also part of the broader narrative. The banning of Pride marches earlier in the year and the legal pressure against organisers of events in cities outside the capital have drawn attention and criticism from rights organisations across Europe. These issues feed into the EU's concerns about democratic backsliding in member states that once looked to Brussels for support in strengthening protections. Back on the geopolitical front, energy remains a sore point. Despite the EU's efforts to diversify away from Russian fossil fuels, Hungary has maintained close ties to Russian energy. Recently, Viktor Orbán announced that Turkey will guarantee the continued flow of Russian gas to Hungary, ensuring energy supply amid rising regional tensions. This announcement drew criticism from EU partners who are pushing for reduced reliance on Moscow and increased investment in renewable alternatives. Orbán's reliance on Russian energy underscores the real economic and strategic calculations that inform his policy choices. All of these disagreements are happening as Hungary prepares for its 2026 parliamentary election in April. Opinion polls indicate that opposition parties may be gaining ground, and that has raised the stakes for Orbán. His Fidesz party has dominated Hungarian politics for more than a decade, but signs of electoral competitiveness have increased in recent months. The outcome of that election will have implications not only for Hungary's internal direction, but for the whole EU as well, given how central Hungary's position has become in major EU debates. This tension within the EU isn't happening in a vacuum. Broader geopolitical shifts, including changes in US foreign policy and shifting transatlantic relations under the current American administration, add another layer of complexity. Recently, the European Council President publicly warned the United States against interfering in European affairs, reflecting discomfort with external pressure and changing strategic expectations. That tension over how Europe defines its security posture shows just how much external context feeds into internal EU debates. And then there's the broader question of how Europe should manage its relations with Russia. The EU is pushing to use frozen Russian sovereign assets to support Ukraine for the next several years. Russia quickly responded with legal action, suing Euroclear in Moscow over the frozen assets, signalling that this will not be a straightforward or uncontested process. Beyond legal battles, this reflects the reality that Europe is confronting not just a security challenge, but a legal and economic struggle over assets and influence. Orbán's defence of his policies and criticism of the EU's actions are rooted in a belief that the Union is overreaching and that national governments should have more say in matters of security and economic direction. His followers see him as a defender of national sovereignty. His critics see his approach as empowering illiberal shifts and undermining European unity at a time when that unity is most needed. So what does all of this mean in practical terms? On one level, it means that the EU is being forced to confront hard questions about its own decision-making structure. Can 27 diverse member states continue to rely on unanimity for major foreign policy and sanctions matters? Does the bloc have the legal basis to adopt emergency powers when the threat landscape demands quicker response? And perhaps most importantly, does the EU have the political will to enforce its values while also managing strategic disagreements among its members? For viewers who want to stay informed about how these tensions unfold, if you're serious about understanding the strategic direction of Europe and what it means for issues like security, democracy, and economic policy, make sure you subscribe to EU Politics and turn on notifications. These debates are not going away anytime soon, and the decisions made at summits and in parliaments across Europe will shape the world we live in for years to come. Thanks for watching.